find interesting is when we have two values, Jewish values or secular values, that come into conflict with one another in the Torah and also in our lives. So I thought maybe we'd talk a little today about the values of honesty and peace and what happens when they come into conflict with one another and which one's more important. So before we look at any text, I want to ask you, right, we're going to take a vote in a minute, so take a second and think. If you had to pick only one, honesty or peace, which do you think is more important? Don't raise your hands yet. Think about it. Everyone ready for a vote? All right, raise your hands for honesty. Honesty trumps peace. Honesty is more important. Okay, hands down. And raise your hands for peace. Peace is more important. Okay, so we have a majority for peace, but definitely some people are both. Anyone who raised their hand for honesty who could tell us why? Yeah. Honesty helps drive peace. Okay. Okay, and someone who raised their hands for peace? Tell us why? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, guys. Live streaming won't pick up your voices, so we have to pass the mic around when you're all talking.
Okay.
On the question of why peace over honesty, I think of the phrase shalom bayit, peace in the home. So I might want not to say the exact truth, so I still have quiet life for everybody at the house.
Great. Okay. So we have one opinion that honesty is what drives peace, and we have another opinion that sometimes we have to forego a little bit of honesty in order to have shalom bayit, peace in the home. And these, I think, are issues that we're going to see develop a little bit over the course of our time together. So I'm going to pass out some source sheets to you. When you get these, there are some yellow Post-it notes on the back covering the last source. Don't take off the Post-it notes. I think we're going to have a better discussion if these and take some and pass behind you. If we don't see the last source right away. So while these are being passed out, I'll give you a little bit of background for the first source that we're going to read. The first source comes from Genesis, and it's about Abraham and Sarah. And the background here is that Abraham and Sarah have been so longing to have a child. Sarah is now 89 years old. Abraham is 99 years old. They have not been able to have a child, even though they really want to. And a messenger of God, an angel, comes to Abraham, and Sarah overhears the conversation. An angel comes to Abraham and says, "You are going to have a child." And we're about to see this is the famous reaction that Sarah has to the news that she's going to become pregnant. You may know this, that she laughs, and that's where we get the name Yitzchak, Isaac. Tzachak is the root for laughter. And so we're going to read this part right now, and I want you to pay attention. See if you find anything odd about this or some kind of inconsistency in what we read. Would anyone be willing to read for us in the English the first text? Anyone? You get to use the microphone that Adrian will bring you. Please, thank you. This is the first text here from Genesis 18.
And Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "Now that I am withered, am I to have enjoyment with my husband, so old?" Then Adonai said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Shall I in truth bear a child, old as I am?'"
Great. So what happened here? Anyone notice anything? What happened? So what is Sarah? Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry, you need the microphone.
Sarah doesn't seem to be focused on the child. She seems to be focused on the enjoyment of conceiving the child.
Okay, so yeah, her focus is actually different than what we might expect. Great. Anything else that's odd here? What does Sarah say? What's the reason that Sarah gives for why she can't believe this, why she laughs, why it's so inconceivable that they would have a child? What's the reason?
She says, "Va'ani zakanti."
Well, actually, does she say that?
Yeah. למה זה צריך...
Sarah says is, am I really going to have a child, va'adoni zaken, with my husband who's so old? Can I really have a child? My husband is so old. And the second, well, there's a 10-year difference, okay. The second verse says, God now goes to Abraham and asks him, why did Sarah laugh like that? Why did she laugh and say, am I really going to have a child, va'ani zakanti, now that I'm so old? So what happened here? Take the microphone and tell us.
Well, it's switched around because in the first part they're talking about the husband being so old.
Yeah.
And then Sarah being, and then Adonai says, changes it around.
Yes.
And says that Sarah says that she's so old.
Yes. So there's an inconsistency here. When God reports what Sarah said, it seems to us, reading these verses, that maybe God changed the words. Those are not the words that Sarah originally used. So the commentators, the medieval biblical commentators, we're going to read a few of them, disagree about what happened here. And I would put them into two camps. Position number one, which we're going to read a couple of commentators who say this, is that Sarah actually meant to say, I am old. This was just God's way of kind of rephrasing, but Sarah really meant to say, va'ani zakanti, that I am old. It just came out in a different way. You have a comment or question?
What she said and what God knew she meant to say, what was in her head, maybe that's what he heard.
Great. So actually, will you hold on to the microphone then and read the next source for us? Because I think you're on the right track here.
I am old for this.
Yeah, great.
I am old for the sake of peace. God did not want to reveal that she had said, my husband is old, because what she really meant was, my husband and I are old. Sarah was really laughing about both of them.
Yeah. So Ramban here says that, okay, I know she said my husband is so old, but of course God knows what was really in Sarah's head. We have no way to know, but God knows everything. God knows that what Sarah really meant, she was laughing about both of them. She's 89, he's 99. Of course, they're both so old. God knows. It was just restating it, right? And for the sake of peace, we kind of left off one part, but we're focusing on the main part. Sarah knows that she is very old. Let's read the next source, which kind of tells us a similar idea. Would anyone like to read in the English? This is Rashbam now. Adrian.
I am old, for she had referred to her withering in verse 12.
Great. So the first part that we read from the very first source, we read two verses. Verse 12, she talks about her withering, her own biological state. So it does make sense to believe that what she was really laughing about was herself. I think there's something logical about that, right? That she was acknowledging how old she herself was based on her biological state. And so when she laughed, she was really laughing about herself. All right, what do you think about this? I'm going to say camp number one, that God was just kind of restating it, but what Sarah really meant was that she is old. Okay.
I don't want to, what I think, honestly, I think this woman is very respectful to her husband. She doesn't want to hurt his feelings. So she said, bloti, that means I'm menopausal. Like, she acknowledges now that she's not young, and by mistake I said he's old. But it's really the person that is old is me. I'm the one that cannot give birth.
Great.
So she's out of respect for her husband.
Okay, so you agree with these commentators?
I think so too. Yeah, absolutely.
Great, okay. Another comment here.
Actually, if I think about the physiology of conceiving, I really believe that she meant I myself am old. It's not possible because I'm old, because the physiology is such that Abraham could have had a child, but not she at that age.
Okay, so we're thinking from a physiological, biological perspective, it really could be that she just kind of slipped. She said the wrong words, but what she meant to say was va'ani zakanti, I am so old. Okay. Let's look at another position. So this is camp number 2, position number 2. And this is that God actually changed the words. No beating around the bush here. God changed the words for the sake of either preserving Abraham's feelings or for the sake of preserving peace between Abraham and Sarah. And this comes back to the idea of shalom bayit that we talked about at the beginning. So would someone be willing to read Rashi in the English?
Scripture, God, in relating her words to her husband, alters them for the sake of peace. For she had said, "My husband is old."
Great. Plain and simple. This is kind of classic Rashi, like notices a problem and gives us a plain and simple answer. Yeah, God changed the words. We have some words in verse 12, and then we have other words in verse 13. How do you think those words got changed? God changed them for the sake of peace between Abraham and Sarah. Let's read. So Rashi is referring to a point that's made in a midrash, a Breshit Rabbah. Let's read that. Would someone be willing to read in the English there? This is the last one. I'll make somebody read.
And Adonai said unto Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, quote, seeing that I am old, quote? Bar Kappara said, great is peace, for even Scripture, or God in this case, made a misstatement in order to preserve peace between Abraham and Sarah. Thus it is written, why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I in truth bear a child old as I am? It does not say, since my Lord is old, but rather seeing that I am old."
Great, thank you. So just to give you the background there, Bar Kappara, Shimon Bar Kappara is a rabbi of the late 2nd, early 3rd century CE. So what do you think about position 2, Rashi in this midrash, that God just changed the words to preserve peace, preserve Abraham's feelings? What do you think? Here. Sorry, Adrian, thank you for being our runner.
I'm surprised God thinks that Abraham is so thin-skinned that he can't handle it.
Okay.
He already has a kid with Hagar, so he obviously is capable. And, dear God, why are you protecting Abraham? He is old. And if Sarah said, you are old, get over it.
Right. Wait, why are we assuming Abraham's so thin-skinned? I mean, he's 99 years old. Have you ever met a 99-year-old who thinks that they're young? Well, maybe, but like really honestly thinks that they're young? No. Yes.
I don't know why all these commotions about Abraham being old. Because, at that time, people lived a long, long time, 200 years, 300 years, and they had children. So Sarah knew that it's not her husband. Sarah knew that it was her. Very good example, my grandfather. I'm not going to...
Okay, so this is an agreement with position number 1, right? That God didn't change the words, that Sarah really she did mean to be referring to herself. Great. Any other thoughts? Thoughts on whether God changed the words, position 1, position 2? Yeah, great.
Well, if God did change the words to protect the feelings of Abraham, I wonder if that supports an idea that perhaps God is female.
Oh, do you want to say one more sentence? Do you want to give us a little more explanation?
Well, that really is, I think, a feminine trait historically, to be sensitive to feelings and to think through how words and actions are going to affect someone else. And there's also, if this is the true interpretation, there's a protective type of component to that.
That's so interesting. Cool interpretation. So no matter what you believe here about whether God changed the words or not, it's clear based on the situation that we're dealing with two conflicting values, right? Honesty and peace. And whether brutal honesty is a Jewish value. Whether it really makes sense to be brutally honest with someone. So I'm curious what you think now. We took a vote at the beginning here about honesty and peace, and we heard a couple of opinions. What do you think? Honesty and peace as Jewish values, and when do you think, can you think of a situation where one would take precedence over the other? Okay, great. So sorry, use the mic so we can.
So where it might cause somebody else pain.
Where it could cause somebody else pain.
Serious pain.
Serious pain. It's not worth it to be brutally honest when you might cause somebody else pain. And this comes back to thinking about how thin-skinned is Abraham. Would it cause him serious pain to know that his wife called him really old? Maybe. We don't know. You're not buying it. But but we don't know. But I think that's a great point, that brutal honesty is actually not a value necessarily when we might cause someone serious pain.
I think, although I was one that said shalom bayit is preferred, there are times when brutal honesty is required, such as being a witness in a court case. Whether you think, gee, this person's a nice guy, but yes, Your Honor, I really saw him commit that crime. Brutal honesty at times is the preferred action.
Great. So especially in the case of being a witness in a court case, honesty has to come first, right? You could think someone's a perfectly nice person, but that doesn't change if you saw something happen that you have to report. So in thinking about some of these categories of types of situations, types of times when honesty might take precedence, or when shalom bayit, peace, might take precedence, Rabbi Joseph Telushkin writes in his book, A Code of Jewish Ethics, about 6 categories, 6 types of cases that are found in the Torah and in the Talmud for when being dishonest is permitted and actually sometimes even obligatory. What was that? And so before you remove the Post-its from your sheet, don't remove the Post-its yet. Before you remove them, before you find out what the 6 categories are, I want to see if we can guess some of them, because I think we already started naming some possibilities here. What would you think should go in 6 categories, or just give us one if you have one, of when it could be acceptable or maybe even obligatory to lie? Yeah.
To save someone's life.
Yeah, to save a life. That's like always the number one answer, right? Pikuach nefesh is more important than anything else. And we can you know, if we need to lie in order to save a life, absolutely. Okay, for the live stream, yeah, but thank you.
I think it's important to lie about something happy, like a surprise party. It's a small thing, but I think it's important to do that, to preserve the surprise.
Okay.
But only for happy, good things.
Okay, so for the sake of preserving a surprise, okay, while we're over here, Anita had one, and then we'll...
To preserve somebody else's, who you're lying about, to preserve somebody else's sense of good feeling, sense of integrity, sense of esteem, that you don't really want to crush a person.
Right. Right, to protect someone's dignity, someone's self-esteem. Great, yes, over here.
So, for example, if you see a baby and you cannot say the baby is ugly,
such a good example.
Or the bride is ugly.
Good. Okay, so we're going to see that.
You can say beautiful bride, beautiful baby.
Right, that actually comes straight from the Talmud about telling a bride that she's beautiful. We're going to see that as one of Rabbi Telushkin's examples.
Yeah, I agree with those, and I would generalize them and say it depends on the consequences. Okay? What is the consequence of you being brutally honest and saying that baby's ugly? Yes, you have said the truth, but really the consequences are the parents feel bad about it, and so what's the big deal about lying a little bit?
Right. We have to think about what are the consequences of brutal honesty versus the consequences of preserving peace. Lori?
To preserve someone's privacy.
To preserve someone's privacy.
Someone's asking you about something you know about someone that is not your business to pass on.
Yeah. Or even perhaps to preserve your own privacy. Great. Anyone else? Yeah.
To avoid unnecessary embarrassment.
Great, great. And I think that goes along with Anita's comment about dignity and self-esteem, to avoid unnecessary embarrassment. Absolutely. Anyone else? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Use the microphone so live streamers.
How about to avoid gossiping?
To avoid gossiping, right? To lie and say, oh, I don't know. I don't know about that.
I don't know about that because you heard it, but you didn't see it yourself.
Great, great. To avoid gossiping. Any other examples, categories you think should be? We have, I think Gary over here has one.
Sorry.
Thank you, Adrian.
I think there's times when the truth doesn't change anything and there's no constructive value to it.
Oh, okay. So when the truth doesn't change anything, there's nothing constructive about it. This isn't like constructive feedback that's going to help somebody grow. It's just going to be hurtful. There's no point in hurting them. Great.
Well,
Rabbi Adam?
and by extension, if sometimes telling someone the truth, if it's something, the ugly baby is the perfect example, they can't do anything about it.
Right.
Like there's nothing to change. If you're giving someone honest feedback because you know that they could make an alteration in whatever as and improve their lot, then you can really potentially get over whatever difficulty you might have in the conversation. But if you're just telling someone and they can't do anything about what you're telling them, and then you're just leaving them feeling worse about what it is.
Right, right. Tell someone their baby is ugly, but that's the most horrible thing. But what are they supposed to do about it? Okay.
Sometimes people lie, sometimes leaders or people lie because they think that what they're doing is they're lying for a greater cause. I'm not going to be political here, but there is an instance going on right now where, you have somebody lying because maybe it's better for my country. Maybe it's better for this or this. So they're lying, in essence, to preserve themselves, but they're telling themselves they're lying for a greater cause.
Okay, so lying for a greater cause. Okay. Any other examples? I think you all have come up with more than Rabbi Talishkin at this point, which is great. Do you have any more? Any other examples? Times, cases? Yeah, over here. Sorry, Adrian, to make you.
Can I just ask that when you're talking into the microphone, you hold it close to your mouth so that they can hear you at home?
We were talking about other cases when it might be obligatory or acceptable to lie. Okay. All right. Well, if you remember it, let us know. We'll come back to you. Any other possible situations, cases, examples? You remembered it. Yes. Hopefully something I said triggered it.
When you see someone is hurting himself or herself,
Oh.
and they don't even know it, you can bring up an example that it's not true, but to scare them from doing that harmful things. Like, I don't know, think drugs or killing themselves. You can lie about the situation and somehow getting them out of that situation not to hurt themselves or harm themselves.
Excellent. It's kind of a further expounding on the idea of pikuach nefesh, which we heard earlier, saving a life. That, when we think someone may be about to hurt themselves in some way, maybe we do have permission to lie about the situation that they're in order to save them. That's great. Other examples? Yeah. This is Adrian's workout.
Somebody just had a bad accident and they're lying in the street a mess. You don't come up to them and say, "God, you look awful. You're going to die."
Yeah, right. Right. You say you're going to be okay. We think you're going to be okay. You don't tell them, "Wow, you look terrible today. This is not going to go well for you." Right? You wouldn't say that. Okay. Other examples? All right. Are we ready to see Rabbi Talishkin's? Okay. I'll permit you to take the Post-it notes off. So I promised I wouldn't make anybody else read, so I'll read these and go through them. So the first one, he says, lying to prevent future harm. And a few of you talked about examples that fall under this category. For example, when life, either your own or someone else's, is at stake. So this is about pikuach nefesh. But preventing future harm is actually bigger than just pikuach nefesh. It's bigger than just saving a life. It's preventing future harm. Something terrible might happen if you tell the truth, and so you actually might need to lie in order to save someone, make sure something terrible doesn't happen. Category 2, lying in order to right a past wrong done to you. By the way, I just want to say these examples come straight from his book. I didn't write these examples. So this example, when dealing with a dishonest or deceptive person or government. Category 3, lying when the effect of telling the truth will cause unnecessary hurt. For example, when people's feelings are involved and no advantage but only pain will come from speaking the truth. So this is one that we've seen, right? We heard before about the example of the bride and the baby. The bride, guy said, comes straight from the Talmud. This is a very well-known example. We always tell a bride she's beautiful, she's graceful. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not, because to say otherwise would hurt her feelings unnecessarily. There's no reason to say anything else. And it's the same thing about seeing a newborn baby. Of course, you're not going to say, "Oh, that's an ugly baby." You would never do that. And I think this category comes into play with Abraham and Sarah here. Right? What benefit could Abraham possibly get, or could anyone possibly get, from knowing that Sarah actually said the words, "My husband is so old"? Like, is there any good that comes from that? Abraham can't make himself younger. There's nothing constructive that comes from that. All right, category 4, lying to create peace or otherwise do good. For example, lying to a poor person to encourage him to accept money he needs. So another example is lying to two people who are in conflict with one another, telling each one that the other party esteems them and wants to make peace. Right? To be able to create peace, that, Rabbi Talishkin says, that is a good enough reason to lie, to be dishonest, when you're able to create peace from it. And I think we're seeing this category with Abraham and Sarah, too, right? And this is not just peace in general. This is peace in the home, shalom bayit, which is an even more important value that maybe God knows that Abraham, whether we believe he's thin-skinned or not, Abraham might take it badly. And not only is this a category 3 that we're going to hurt his feelings, but this is a category 4 where if he knows what Sarah really said, it's going to harm their relationship. It's going to harm shalom bayit. They're not going to have peace in their home if he knows that. And so maybe the words are different because of that. Okay. Category 5, lying because a question invades your zone of privacy. So I think Lori mentioned this, right? It's too much. You don't want to have to answer the question whether it's about yourself or about someone else. Rabbi Talishkin gives this example of someone telling unwanted suitors that they're engaged or married. Lying in order to protect privacy. And category 6, lying when exaggerating to make a point, and it is understood that you are exaggerating. So he gives the example of somebody saying, "I was so upset, I thought I was going to explode." Okay, we all know when someone says that, they don't really physically think that they're going to explode into a million pieces. They're going to explode. They're going to be angry. It's an exaggeration, and we all understand that. And I was thinking about your example of the surprise party. So that a surprise party is different from an exaggeration, but I would kind of put that in a similar category where the intent isn't really about lying. You're not really trying to deceive somebody. You don't want them to go forever thinking that the surprise party wasn't planned or that you were so angry that you were going to explode. The intent isn't deception. The intent is to say something in that situation in order to create a kind of a happier result. Right? So what do you think about these 6 categories? Thumbs up in general? People like them? Okay. Anything you would add? Anything that's not here that you're thinking like, why didn't Rabbi Talishkin include this? Yeah, Michael?
As this whole session was going on, I was reminiscing of that something that kind of answered all the interchange and everything about Sarah. When we were walking the Mamila Mall, I don't know, years ago. There was, when you first went in to the mall, there was a bunch of sculptures on the left side, and one was one that I wanted very badly. I wanted to buy it. I wanted to take it home. I fell in love with it. And it was showing Sarah on a kind of a sofa, just laying there with this look on her face that was radiating, that was saying, "See, you don't really have to say anything." And she said it all in that look that this artist had captured. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, she had a little, and she was pregnant.
You're commenting on her facial expression here that she's pregnant. She knows that she's pregnant, and she's everything that we've been talking about here is kind of captured in her face, in her expression, in that sculpture. Anita had a comment. Wait one sec. Wait for the microphone.
I'm a little surprised actually about number 5.
Okay.
Lying because a question invades your zone of privacy.
Yeah.
Nobody's really going to get hurt with that if they they don't have to say I don't like you, but I mean they could handle it in a different way than I think outright. lying, that they're engaged, there's a more diplomatic way that you could say it without having to outright lie.
Okay. I disagree, respectfully. Some men will not take no for an answer unless a woman says, I'm attached to another man. They won't leave them alone. They'll follow them home. They'll be obnoxious about it or possibly dangerous. So single women often find themselves lying to protect their physical security, not just not to be annoyed.
Thank you. Yeah, so two different perspectives on this idea of someone's zone of privacy. And I think, he's talking about this idea of someone who really, someone asks a question, and I love that Lori brought up, it doesn't have to just be about yourself. It could be about someone else. You know something about someone else. And someone asks you a question, and someone mentioned about kind of avoiding lashon hara, avoiding gossip as well. Someone asks you a question, and you do know the answer. But to tell that person the answer would really be invading the other person's privacy, or it would be engaging in gossip. And you don't want to do that. So you just say, oh, I don't know. Or, oh yeah, I think actually the situation is this way, even though you know it's not. Because you need to not invade somebody's zone of privacy, whether that's for physical safety or emotional safety, or whether it's just about being a respectful person and not invading somebody's privacy. Okay, so I know we need to start wrapping up. I just wanted to give one last opportunity if there was any other comments on these 6 categories or things that you would add. Okay. So I think the kind of common, let's say, Western Christian perspective is that lying is always wrong, right? Like honesty is an absolute value, no matter what. And I think that Jewish text tells us something a little bit different, actually, that honesty is very important, and truth is an important value, but it's not an absolute value. And there are situations when we have to understand that honesty and peace are both values of ours, and sometimes they come into conflict with one another. And we have to balance our desire for honesty with our desire for peace, because both are important values, and it means that we have to constantly walk that delicate balance between the two. Thanks, everyone. Shabbat shalom.
Yashikoa.
Any questions? Yeah.
We have one. So I have to apologize if I'm making you all a bit crazy, and hopefully that's an exaggeration, not a reality. The reason I'm asking you to hold it real close to your mouth and talk only into the mic is that we've been having some problems with the live streaming over the last couple of weeks during the teaching and during the Q&A, that the people that are trying to watch live streaming, and it's a very large number of people watching from either their homes or their travels, that they cannot hear the questions, they cannot hear the commentary. So that's the reason I'm asking you guys to please use the mic and speak into it.
New York is a long ways from California, very different in a lot of ways. What would bring you here other than just the position?
So thank you for the question. Number one, in looking for a position for myself for next year, I'm looking for the right fit. I'm looking for a place where I feel comfortable, where I'm sitting in the service and I feel happy and I'm smiling and I feel like this is a community that I could really see myself as a part of. But I really could see myself moving here. I shared with other members of the search committee that there were jobs in other cities that I don't have friends in and I don't know people in, and I didn't even apply to jobs there or didn't accept weekend visit invitations there because I'm not interested in moving there. And I have friends here. I have family friends. Tonight I'm meeting up with a friend who lives in Silver Lake and we're getting dinner. I think that being here I would have a number of people that would make me happy, that I would feel supported, and I have people here. My parents live on the East Coast, but they love to travel, and they, I think, are already thinking about, where might they get to visit if they visit me in LA, what restaurants will we eat at? I think they're excited about that, and I know that they'll visit me, and I think it would be comfortable for me.
Who else? So I have a question about your teaching.
Please.
since you were given the opportunity to teach about anything you wanted, why did you choose that particular lesson? And why did you choose those commentaries?
I really I started out by saying that something that I find interesting in Jewish text and also in our lives is when two values that we hold dear come into conflict with one another. And so this is actually one of my favorite, this story of Abraham and Sarah is one of my favorite in the Torah. It's something like when we get to this Parsha Vayera, it's like I'm always excited about it. It's because I think it's so fascinating. And it brings out lots of different opinions about, well, God did change the words, God didn't change the words. There's like an interesting theological component about about God's knowing people's feelings, God's being in tune, like you said, with kind of people's emotions and wanting to be a protector. I just think there are lots of avenues for interesting conversation. So it's one of my favorite pieces of Torah. And so that's why I wanted to discuss it with you all.
Interfaith communications, interfaith collaboration, interfaith musical celebrations have been a long part of the history here at Temple Aliyah. How do you feel about that?
Thank you. So I'm currently the rabbinic intern at Park Avenue Synagogue in Manhattan, and I've worked a lot with interfaith couples. That's probably the biggest part of my internship there. And sometimes I work with them because one person in the couple is interested in conversion, but sometimes I'm working with them and someone's not interested in conversion and they just want to be part of the synagogue community. They want to learn more, they want to be involved, but they're not necessarily interested in becoming Jewish. And that's okay too. And I want everyone to feel comfortable. Everyone who wants to be part of a Jewish community, I want them to feel comfortable being part of the community. And I think we can't afford not to be welcoming to people. We have to be welcoming to anyone who wants to be here. So that's actually something that I think is really exciting about this place, that Rabbi Vogel and all of you have kind of opened your arms to all different types of people who want to be part of this community.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I'm dominating questions here.
Okay.
Just to carry on a little bit further on that, could you just give a little bit of information about the Pathways program that you are creator of at Park Avenue and co-founder of?
Yeah. So Adrian's bringing up a program called Pathways to Judaism. This is the program that I mentioned with interfaith couples, some people who are just interested in conversion on their own, some people who were born Jewish who just didn't have a lot of background, want to learn more. So one of the rabbis at Park Avenue and I together established this new program called Pathways to Judaism. It's an 18-week class, and we mentor students all the way through from the first meeting when they walk in the door and say, I might want to consider being Jewish, or I'm in an interfaith relationship, or I want to learn more, and we meet with them throughout the program to those final moments when, if they are converting, we sit with them at the mikvah and formally welcome them into the Jewish people. And we've now run 2 cohorts of the Pathways program, and I also started what we're calling Pathways 2.0, the graduate program, because I don't want people to stop coming after that. They've come for 18 weeks, they've immersed themselves in this community, and they form such a nice cohort. I recently went out to dinner with a group of the women from the first Pathways cohort we did, and they have a texting group. They're still really in touch with each other, and I don't want that to be the end, and they are hungry for more and want to keep coming back. So I started this Pathways 2.0 where they come back once a month, and we now have 2 cohorts of Pathways graduates that are coming back, and we're now starting the 3rd class of Pathways that come back once a month for additional learning, additional community building, and they're excited to be there. It's an amazing thing.
Oh, okay. David, then we'll move over there.
When you were a student at Penn, you wrote an honors thesis.
Yes.
Status and role of Orthodox Jewish and Muslim women in America.
Yeah.
Did anything in that research help you define your rabbinate as a conservative rabbi?
Yeah.
Excuse me, what was the name of your thesis again?
The name of the thesis was Status and Role of Orthodox Jewish and Muslim Women, and an inside perspective. So for the thesis, my research was actually through interviews, and I was living in West Philadelphia at Penn, and I interviewed a number of Orthodox women in the area and Muslim women in the area, observant Muslim women, and I asked them the same set of questions about their practices, their beliefs, their roles within the community, and how they felt about their roles. Did they feel that they were second-class citizens to some extent? Did they want to be more involved than they were able to be? And what I kept hearing, which was surprising to me on some level, and on another level not so surprising, was that they were satisfied. You know, they felt like, if you've ever heard people, Orthodox Jews, say, well, women are on a higher spiritual level. So a lot of them feel that they're on a higher spiritual level, and they don't need to do the mitzvot that men do. They don't need to wear a talit. They don't need to wear a tefillin. They don't need to do all they don't need to read Torah. They don't need to be able to lead a service, because those are things that men do, but women are on a higher spiritual level. And I heard that time and time again. Honestly, it was a little bit frustrating to me to keep hearing that, because that's not the perspective that I come from. But it was interesting to feel that a lot of these women Orthodox Jews and Muslims, were actually very, very satisfied with their way of life. And even as I tried to kind of get them to say, like, but is there anything you're dissatisfied with? Are you sure? Are you sure? People were really happy with their lifestyle, and it made me, I think you asked about how it affects my conservative rabbinate. I am really committed to the conservative movement. I grew up in the conservative movement. In college, I made friends who were Reform and Orthodox, and I respect them, but it's not, and I respect them, and I learned about their lifestyles and their forms of Judaism, and it's not mine. And I feel really committed to the conservative movement. But there was something interesting for me about learning about their Orthodox lifestyles through doing this thesis project, and feeling like, okay, you know what? They're satisfied with their way of life, and that's wonderful. It wouldn't be satisfying for me. I imagine it might not be satisfying for some of you in this room, and that's probably why you're in this room right now. And so it's great that there are different forms of Judaism for different types of people who want different things.
How do you feel about the current relationship between Jews in America and Israel? For the longest time when I was growing up, maybe 67 and beyond, a little bit, it was, I support Israel, period. Now it seems like it's, I support or we support Israel, but. So how do you feel about that?
Great question. So I said this to a couple people on the search committee already, that I think something we have to, a good framework for understanding Israel is something I heard from a speaker. I was just in Israel this past December. I'm an APAC LaFell Fellow, which is through, APAC does this rabbinic fellowship. And so as part of the fellowship, I got to go on this trip to Israel in December. We heard a speaker who talked about zooming in and zooming out. And this was his framework for understanding. He said, when you zoom in, you see the details on the ground. Maybe you see the culture, and you see the problems, and you see what's going on. And you also have to zoom out, and you have to see what happened in 67 and in 48. And you have to have a broad perspective, because you can't understand the zoom in without the zoom out. You just can't. If you just zoom in, you're missing something. You're missing the big picture. And so I think personally, I'm a strong Zionist. I care a lot about Israel. I love Israel. That's not to say that I think everything that happens in Israel is perfect. But I don't think everything that happens in America is perfect. I mean, and there's no country in the world that's perfect. And it's important to zoom in and know what's good and what's not so good, and really see the facts on the ground, and zoom out and get a larger perspective on the region and the history.
Who else?
What kind of reading do you like to do in not only your spare time, but on topics such as Hasidism? Who would be your favorite Rebbe besides, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
So I actually have not done a lot of reading on Hasidism, I'll tell you that. So I don't know if I can answer your favorite question about my favorite Rebbe. I'll have to think about it and get back to you. But in terms of other reading that I like to do in my spare time, I don't know if you'll consider this spare time or not, but even sometimes in my spare time I'll read about Jewish things, and occasionally we'll end up using that in teachings. A book that I'm reading right now, it's actually not the right time of year to be reading this, but reading a book about the high holidays called This Is Real and You're Completely Unprepared. Some of you are nodding, you've heard of this, by Alan Liu. So it's this book that takes you through the seasons of the high holidays in a very spiritual way. He talks about the parshiot that lead up to the high holidays, and even kind of the high holidays, not just meaning Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but again, I guess I'm going to say zooming out, okay? And talking about the holidays leading up to it, the holidays afterwards, and the spiritual journey of doing tshuva, of turning, of becoming better versions of ourselves. And it's not the high holidays, but it's still speaking to me now about how I can keep working on being a better version of myself.
If you were the second rabbi here and you had to pick an area of emphasis that you really wanted to concentrate on, and as you saw the synagogue, you felt needed improvement in something that was important to you, some area, what would that look like? What would that be?
If you want to say something else about it,
That's okay. Like, would it be more with youth? Would it be more with establishing more spirituality center? Would it be Israel? I mean, what areas would speak to you that you feel you want to bring to the synagogue?
Great. Okay. So a few things are coming to mind. One is about connecting with young families and young adults, with families or not, and bringing people in, especially people who might not necessarily feel comfortable just walking into a synagogue. They don't know what to wear, they don't know where to sit, they don't know anyone, and figuring out how we can lower the barriers to entry for those people, to be able to bring those people in, engage them where they are, but geographically meet them where they are, and then find ways to keep bringing them in. I mentioned this also to a couple of members of the search committee, that I was a Millennial Engagement Fellow at JTS. And as part of that, I taught little kind of learning sessions in New York City. And I also went to Camp 999, which is a Memorial Day weekend camp for people Jews in their 20s and 30s. Mostly people who are not affiliated with synagogues, not really that involved in Jewish life in other ways. And I was brought in as a Jewish educator. And I led sessions like Judaism and personal growth, there was some text study, but there was also journaling and conversation. And I did a conversation about getting angry with God and like what happens in our lives that causes us to get angry with God. And I actually made some really nice relationships with some of the people from this Memorial Day weekend camp, who then afterwards stayed in touch with me and wanted to be more involved in Jewish community. They got a little taste of it and wanted more. And because I have been the intern at Park Avenue Synagogue, I've been bringing them to some of the 20s and 30s events to kind of help them find other ways of connection once they got their feet wet a little bit. So also, one answer is bringing people in who maybe it's a higher barrier to entry for them to come in. Another is pastoral work. I have worked as a chaplain intern for hospice, and also in a retirement community. And I do care a lot about end-of-life work. And I created what vidui, this kind of end-of-life deathbed ritual. I created another ritual to go along with it, a loved one's vidui, that kind of helps loved ones reconcile with a person who is dying at the end of life, to be able to help complete that relationship and find ways, liturgical ways of saying thanks and saying sorry and saying I love you, and kind of expressing the themes that people want to say at the end of life. So that's another passion of mine.
I have a related question. Anita was asking about programs. One of the things that this temple is very good at is experimenting with different types of services, and I like the variety. You heard that next week we're going to have Shabbat 2.0. We had Neshama service, various other services. Can you talk about this? What type of services would you suggest, would you introduce if you were to be second rabbi here?
Well, I have to tell you that I've been watching a lot of the archived videos online of your services here. I've watched them the past month now. So I have a sense of all the different types of services that happen here, which are beautiful. And I think it's amazing, actually, to have different types of every Friday night to have a different type of service and to incorporate different tunes and a different demographic, I think is amazing. And, I have to tell you, I don't necessarily have right now in mind what service I would add to the mix, because I think I think I would need to be here for a little while to see where the gaps are, what we might need to keep improving upon. But I noticed last night there's a service for preschool families, and then there was a family service, and I know they used to be combined, and now they're separated. And I would be interested in thinking about if once in a while they would be interested in combining again, or what it could look like to have some overlap, or some kids kind of going between the two services so that it could feel more communal, like there's kind of one experience happening. But I also, I say that as I don't want to be an outsider, but at the moment am a little bit of an outsider. I've been here for 48 hours at this point, not even. So I don't know. I mean, I would have to really, I think it's really important to know a community before you step in and say, here are all the things I want to change. Yeah.
I Googled you because you're there, right?
You're allowed.
I watched your senior sermon. It was very smart. I also went to your Facebook page, whatever was public, and I see that you have a political bent. Does that ever come into your sermon?
No, not really. I think it's really important for everyone to feel welcome. I said this about interfaith families, but I think this as well about politics. I think it's important for someone to be able to come in here and be all the way on one side of the spectrum, all the way on the other side of the spectrum about any given issue, any given politician, and not to feel alienated by what a rabbi is saying up here. I could believe anything I want, you could believe anything you want, but that doesn't mean that we can't be in sacred spiritual community together.
Can I be so bold as to ask what that political bent is, since I didn't look on Facebook or any of that, and Ophira put it so nicely.
Well, I'm gonna follow my own policy that I just set for myself, which is that I don't want to alienate anyone, because I want everyone to feel comfortable with me. So I'm standing on the Bima, or the Bima area right now, so I'm not going to preach politics from the Bima.
So leave your Facebook page up. That's fine. That's fine. But then I have another question, then back to the other question I asked.
Okay.
Do you feel that American Jewry now is showing the right amount of support to Israel? Do you think they should be more supportive? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I think American Jewry really needs to support Israel. That's why I'm involved with AIPAC. That's why I'm a rabbinic fellow. And I think I would love to see more American Jews supporting Israel. I think a lot of American Jews in my generation are not necessarily supporting Israel as much as we used to see every generation always supporting Israel. And I want to be part of a change in that, which is why, again, is why I'm involved with AIPAC. Sure.
Who else?
Thank you for all your honesty and your lovely words. I often find that my teenager is one of the few teenagers that comes, and I'm not always bringing her. I'm not saying she doesn't come willingly, but I definitely have to urge her. And I'm so intrigued by these people that you're seeing in your practice with maybe not growing up with Judaism, and they're coming, and they're so excited about it. So what are we doing? Like, when we have lots of people who aren't engaged, and you're finding these people coming into your teaching and your classes who are coming out of choice. I don't know if I've got a great question there, but what's the spark? And why isn't it really resting within the rest of us? So does that make any sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think about that all the time, that there is something amazing, and that's actually something I love about the Pathways to Judaism program that I've been teaching, because it's 20 adults who are dying to be there. Like, if they have to miss class, they're so upset about it. They want to be there. They want to learn. They're doing the readings in advance, and they come with all these questions. It's amazing. And yeah, We walk into a typical Hebrew school classroom, and sometimes kids don't really want to be there. You tell a teenager, come with me to services, and they often don't want to be there. And it's hard, and I don't have a perfect, if I had a perfect answer for it, we'd be having a different conversation. But I don't have the perfect answer for it. And I think that part of it is that different things are sparks for different people. And I think let's talk about teenagers. Some teenagers, the spark for them is about other teenagers. It's about their friends. Are all their friends coming to this? And if we get all their friends to come, then of course they're going to be there. That's where all their friends are. For some teenagers, the spark could be something on a more intellectual level or a meaningful level. For some teenagers, the spark is music. They love music and they want to be in an environment with music. So I think it's about personal relationships as much as it's possible for rabbis and cantors and educators to have personal one-on-one relationships with teenagers and with anyone who is not necessarily always coming in the door right away, to be able to figure out what is the spark for that person. Because once you can figure out what the spark is for that person, it's a lot easier to get them to come in because you can use that information.
I'm embarrassed to tell you, I sort of fell into this today. I don't have the basics of your resume. Could you tell me where you're from and where you went to school and all that? I missed it. I'm sorry.
That's okay, sure. I am originally from Cherry Hill, New Jersey, near Philadelphia. And I grew up very rooted in my Jewish community there, conservative synagogue, Camp Ramah. And I realized towards the end of high school that I was finding the most joy and meaning and fulfillment in life when I was doing Jewish things, whether it was going to Shabbat dinner, or learning about Israel, going to Hebrew school. That's how I was finding the most joy. And in particular, I was finding the most joy and meaning and fulfillment when I was helping other people do Jewish things. So I realized I needed to be a rabbi. And I went to the University of Pennsylvania for college, and I studied religious studies and a minor in psychology. And then I went straight to rabbinical school at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, where I am now. And throughout my time in rabbinical school, have actually felt that through my internships with different demographics and different types of communities, that this work is actually even more meaningful to me than I initially realized. So I get to spend my life and my career helping people live more meaningful Jewish lives, which is, for me, really amazing work.
Can I just ask a question? Leaving politics out of it, we do have a hope that we create more social action, and I'm leaving the word social justice out of it, more social action communities, more social action programs here at the Temple. And would you have a passion that you would be interested in developing into a social action program here at the Temple?
Yeah. I think I love that's a value here, that you have social action projects and you want to even increase that and be doing more. I think I mentioned to a few people earlier that one of my passions is gender issues. And I care a lot about that. So I could see myself doing some social action work for women who need help, whether it's women who've been victims of domestic violence, domestic abuse. I could be really interested in working with that population, bringing them in. I think there's really room for spirituality there and connection with community and connection with God. So I could see myself being really passionate about doing some of that work.
What are you looking for in a temple? Particularly to be the second rabbi?
So first and foremost, I'm looking for the right fit. I'm looking for a place where I had this moment earlier today during the service when Rabbi Vogel called everyone up to stand in a circle to sing Vishamru. If any of you looked at me, I had this ridiculous grin on my face because I had this moment where I was like, this is amazing. Like, I have felt personally connected to a lot of you over the course of the 48 hours I've been here and have had nice personal conversations with you. And this is such a beautiful tradition that we're standing here in a circle like this and singing this beautiful melody. And I had this moment of this is awesome. So first and foremost, I'm looking for the right fit. I'm also looking to work with a senior rabbi who I think would be a good mentor to me and who I think I would work well with. I shared with the search committee that I am not applying to any solo pulpits, meaning any any synagogues where I would be, small synagogues where I would be the only rabbi, because I really like collaborating with a team, and I enjoy being mentored and want to continue being mentored. I've been lucky to have a lot of great rabbinic mentors in the past, and I want to continue that. So part of the draw for me here is Rabbi Vogel, and that I've heard such amazing things about him from literally everyone I've spoken to, and have now experienced that for myself being here. So that, I think, the right fit and the right kind of like rabbinic and clergy team is really important to me.
Are there other questions? Well, I'm going to switch this up just a little bit, because I've learned over the last few weeks that we haven't been giving the opportunity to the candidate to ask questions. And I'm finding that's actually quite important to the candidate to find out what the community thinks. So, Rabbi Galko, you ask the question.
Okay. So here's a question that anyone can answer. What do you love about Temple Aliyah? What is it that brought you here, that keeps you coming back, that keeps you wanting to be involved, that keeps you in this room right now, giving up your time on Shabbat to want to hear about a second rabbi who could come? Like, what is it about this place that you love?
Well, for me, it was the quality of the clergy. Certainly isn't the architecture, but it was the quality of the clergy, certainly, and the good education we got for our daughters.
Who else?
For me, it's a home, away from home, starting with the kids being raised here, and staying throughout the cycle with the bar mitzvah and so on, and wedding. So it's just a continuation of the expanding the home and keeping the home and community.
Michael's son and daughter-in-law are just two of the many rabbis that have been raised in this congregation.
Very cool.
I remember when we had to come up with a tagline for Temple Aliyah, which is on our sign. And as
Your caring community, right?
It's a warm, right, exactly, a caring community, warm and caring community. And I'm driving around synagogues for many years, visiting synagogues. Community, community, community is in so many of their signs and slogans, and et cetera. But ours is caring, and I remember we talked about, it's like Cheers, the congregation where everyone knows your name. And
I love that.
That's the reason why I've been here for such a long time, because it does feel like a home.
Anybody else?
I also love, as you know, I was at Talmud class yesterday. I love Talmud class. I love Lunch and Learn. I love the learning that's here and being a part of these like small, intimate groups with the rabbi and getting to study, which I find very joyful.
We'll just take two more answers, okay?
Okay.
I like the cookies.
Oh, I'm so glad someone said it.
When we came and our children were young, and I could lure them here with the idea of like a cookie buffet. But that part is really important to me, because I grew up in a conservative synagogue and they didn't provide lunch. And I've spent my time also living in the Pico Robertson area a long time ago, where you would do Shabbat, but you had some pressure to be invited to somebody's house or to have them over to your house. And I loved Shabbat in the Orthodox community, but the idea that we come here and we're given this opportunity to gather together. We have a really sacred space in the mornings that makes me feel like I've entered into this really beautiful, peaceful Shabbat, and then I get to share lunch with everybody, and it's actually really nice.
It's all about the food.
Sometimes it is.
I found it a really easy place to connect with other people. A lot of synagogues, you walk in the door and you feel like nobody comes up to you, nobody says hello, they think, well, she must be there all the time. And I found from the very moment I walked into the door, people were walking up to me, asking me if I was new, and was invited into a Havurah right away. I just connected with other people and connected with the clergy. You know, Rabbi Vogel knew my kid's name before he even met him. And it was that connection that really meant something.
Last one. Okay.
We're talking about community, and to me, this is one of the key things. But community is made up of people. And I really like the people that I meet here, and I'm eager to meet them week after week after week. But there's one more thing, and that's the services that I mentioned earlier. The variety, the quality of the service. And I think that we have services here that address to every taste. We're actually, we have different services, and different people have, they like this one, they like another one. So we have that variety, and I like it.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Down on my job. I was falling down my job. I didn't go get the mic.
We've been members just a little over 2 years now, and I think it started with a spiritual yearning, which, was answered right away. But beyond that, it was so welcoming here. Walked into the first Kiddush, and on Saturday, and people would walk up and say hi. Just a very warm, welcoming place.
All right, I've got a question for this community. My question is, now that we've all listened to everybody, and we've shared other stories with Shana over the last couple of days, by a show of hands, and I apologize that live streaming won't see the show of hands, by a show of hands, how much did that last few minutes of commentary make you feel just amazing about this place? Isn't that amazing? Okay. Any other comments or other questions for Rabbi Galka? You have another question for us?
Or if people have questions for me, that's okay.
I was just going to open up to if there's any more questions from you, because I don't want to lose track of time, and I don't want to not give you the opportunity to ask questions. Are there any other questions? Okay, it's back to you then.
Back to me.
We'll just ask another one or two, and then we'll.
Okay.
Let you go have a Shabbat Shalom.
Okay. All right. This will be. I have a. This will be my last question. So, what are you looking for in a second rabbi? Like, what's important to you in this search? Obviously, you're all here. I now just heard a lot about why you love Temple Aliyah, but you're here now because you're trying to get to know me and figure out if you think I could be the right person to be your second rabbi. So, what are you looking for? What's important to you? Oh, thank you.
I'm actually looking for, among other things, inspiration, like in your sermons and in your philosophy, to really get into depth in subjects and so that I do feel inspired.
Who else? You guys are here for a reason.
We have a couple over here.
Oh, over here? Oh.
Sorry.
Why don't I ignore half the room?
I know for me, I'm looking for a rabbi that's not afraid to challenge congregants to take on more mitzvot, to take on more ritual, and to deepen their experience in Judaism. It's not afraid to go there.
And can I just ask if you have any response to any of these that you do make it, okay?
I'm looking for a rabbi who will continue providing services that all feel comfortable attending, which is more traditional than many other, as compared to many of the other services, but we'll also be able to continue and attract so that this synagogue continues beyond me and many of us in this room.
A single rabbi, Rabbi Vogel, cannot be here all the time. He sets the tone, and he does it very well, and we all like it, but he's not here all the time. So I'm looking for a second rabbi who kind of continues with the same tone, but yet brings their own character, something new to the table.
Oh, I'm sorry, Debbie.
I think, like many synagogues, we're also looking for someone to help guide us in this rapidly changing world as to what the future of Judaism is going to look like, how to keep our youth engaged, the future is very uncertain, and yet we all feel very connected here. How to share that connectedness, how to keep that going.
hard. You're running around, so you can't really.
So I think it's really important for a new rabbi, especially a younger rabbi, to meld or combine the idea of maintaining traditions while at the same time being innovative and creative. And I think that's really a hard thing to do.
Great. Anyone else? One last one.
Basically continuing the same on the same line, continuing with what we have is good, hoping to improve on it, and not a rabbi that is coming in and has some personal agenda to change things and have the personal way wants to do something that is disrupting, will disrupt what we have. We have a good.
You have a good thing going here.
That's right.
Yep.
We just
I've
want to
seen it.
improve it, make it better.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. Those were, all of what you said was really inspiring, both about Temple Aliyah and about what you're looking for in a rabbi. And, it's helpful for me, and it actually is inspiring for me to know what it is that you are seeking in a second rabbi, in a spiritual leader. And so thank you all for sharing that.
Rabbi, do you have any other comments for us? I want to thank you so much for sharing with us this afternoon. And we'll see you again tomorrow morning when you're leading Minyan at 9 a.m.
Yes.
And then we'll have another Q&A in case you think of something you forgot to ask.
Bring your questions.